Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Contemplating a Brick, written by LordsOfJoop. The line surged forward, exactly one sentient being's placement, and the entirety of it shuffled in the same direction. It was over 300 sentient life forms long, and the newest arrival had the patience of granite, having ample experience with cues of all manner and nature. A second lifespan could be said to have been spent in lines, awaiting a bored bureaucrat's brief analysis and interaction, sometimes followed by re-entry into the queue again, depending on circumstances. When the blessed window was opened, the sentient approached the bureaucrat and held out its requisite form. The teller, from a planet colonized some 300 lifespans previously, examined the hidebound documentation, scrutinizing it against the visual templates provided. No glaring errors nor oversights, a sign of someone who was fastidious with their attention to detail, something that their culture was much proud of. They were, in many regards, the Unity's born paperwork shufflers and legal scholars, a point of considerable pride. After a cursory examination came a falsehood analysis, revealing it to be verifiable data and known facts, oddly worded in some cases, although syntax being what it is, the bureaucrat could not find fault with it as much as a mild interest. Looking at the final step, which translated roughly to gut check, a simple yet bizarre routine series of questions engineered to test the veracity and potential harm of someone applying for a specific form. "Yes," the teller said, "here's a formal request for a change of citizenship to Indrili 6. The other end of the equation nodded softly. "Yes. Is there an error or issue with the form, blessed thinker?" The clerk, long since unused to being addressed in such positive terms, let alone their native language, felt a rush of inner delight, expressing it with a thin-line smile. "Not as such, no," came the reply. "The form is in full compliance, supplicant, and we are much impressed with your control over the mother tongue." To this, the applicant said nothing, only angled their head slightly, exhaling in a soft, purring sound, the noise of a young member of the bureaucrat species. A deep sign of respect, even admiration, a cultural touchstone normally shared between close friends. Blushing, insomuch as something with fur coating their visible body can, the bureaucrat grew momentarily suspicious. The gut check had sent a warning signal, a thing of cautious optimism. A fail-safe question was asked. "Do you intend to harm if this is processed to your expressed goal, supplicant?" To this the applicant stopped, even their breath, and then said, "Ask me what I did for a living." Their gaze was eye-watering in its intensity. The bureaucrat had heard much things, those forward-facing binocular eyes, capable of staring through solid obdurinium, it seemed, and withering someone down to their bones with an exotic gaze. It felt that and was worried. What a living?" The bureaucrat stammered. What did you do for a living?" The honorific, so heavily beaten into their doctrine, was erased by that cold, hateful gaze that seemed to spring from nowhere and was aimed at nothing, like it saw the far horizon, beyond the edge of space, and found it lacking, like it could hate itself hard enough to blast through walls. "I was a pediatric orthopedic surgeon and a prosthetics designer," the applicant said. "When my species' children were harmed or born different, my task was to help them find what peace could be found, and to render them in balance with their interests. I tried very hard to make them all whole, when and where I could, and now I'm unable to do that. It's pointless." The bureaucrat, angling their head, regarded the applicant with confusion. A task completer," it said, with a touch of marvel to their voice. "The highest of all accolades, awarded to only those who did the miracles and the blessed. To abandon this, we do not understand. Why is this so?" They furrowed their third tier of eyebrows, leaning in, concern oozing from them, aghast as much as curious. The applicant then placed a 3-kilogram, reddish-brown, oblong block on a narrow counter in front of the teller window, rapping their knuckles against it. "Because I'm going to deliver this to where it'll change the world for everyone I tried to help, or could ever help," they said with sublime confidence. "This is a brick." "It is a brick, yes." "You are applying for off-world relicensing?" "No, just to change my citizenship, and that is my only luggage, if it is approved." A long blank stare followed that. That does not explain the circumstances. The applicant nodded. Correct, they said. It will change them, though. The final tier of eyebrows quirked. Well, the paperwork is in accordance with policy, Enret. I am confused and concerned. My name will be attached to yours if you ever do something unsafe. A risque term, if anything, especially after admitting to being intent on causing at least some degree of harm upon arrival. 119 children, the applicant said. My average recovery rate for them was 87%. Only in 3 cases did I fail to uphold my goal, to help them to walk or do so freely. To this, the bureaucrat winced, only stilled by the softly raised hand of the applicant. They did not walk under my care. They did so under their next provider. The palpable sense of relief was evident, and the applicant continued. Then came the outbreaks, 5 diseases all back to back, and they struck pregnant members of my species, as well as their unborn children. The face of the applicant grew cloudy, their lips into a pair of thin white lines. They left thousands of them sterile, or wishing they were. Malformed offspring were the minimum, not enough to outright kill, enough to leave them as living reminders of power being enacted. The teller had heard of such a thing, although it did not spare much thought. It was some other species' children, after all, and they didn't know any members. Yet now, with one such member in close proximity, it began a grim, hateful reality, unavoidable and terrible. My work, the applicant said, meant nothing. They would never need my services. They'd be bound to machinery for life. What little they'd ever get, and it would be filled with agony. Because their enemies hated them so much, they were crippled and maimed before ever being born long enough to find direct fault with them. The teller, at a realization, said nothing and quietly unsnapped the pistol's holster. Continue, please. The applicant nodded and did so. 5 diseases became 8 new syndromes and a dozen variants of each, on average. They said thousands became millions and pregnancy became scarce. People in our species need 3/4 of a cycle, on average, to fulfill a single brood. And even then, it's after a singleton birth. The teller's race, egg-layers, gestated dozens at a time, fiercely competitive for the first few weeks, dining mostly on slower, weaker siblings. The pistol, a microwave-pumped ion weapon, slid from the holster and into the lap of the seated bureaucrat, unseen by all. The source was traced, the applicant said, to the 5th moon on the Ser cluster, home of the denied raider colonies. Both species had been victims of the brutes who lived in the asteroid belt spanning the Caesar cluster. This place, which straddled the respective arms of the spiral galaxy, a population of roughly 2 billion spacefaring pirates and mercenaries, all fighting for the title of the meanest bastard to ever live. The bureaucrat exhaled, nostrils flaring. Continue. The applicant did so. A year's pay was used to buy a copy, they said, of the blueprints for their comms network hub at Al-Adril, the hellhole they call home. If it fails, they are reduced to subnet answer links, which have a somewhat limited range. In addition to broadcasting their location to anyone within basic radio suite, meaning that the pirates and mercenaries could either sit and be quiet or tell their many enemies where they were hiding. Sooner or later, someone would want to brag, ask a question, or go looking for someone. The gun slid free of the teller's lap, resting in close grip beneath the counter. And it just so happens that Al-Adrel's closest star is Endrel 6. To this, the applicant nodded softly. They were weeping, clear tears running down their cheeks. Yes, they said. Their voice was hollow, empty. Someone who had been scooped out of by horror and filled with something harsh and cold and of little comfort. To this, the bureaucrat paused, then swallowed down a chug of their tea and produced the electronic pad with a glowing red and blue series of symbols on it. You're missing 2 items, the bureaucrat said. My signature and your second item of luggage. The applicant, looking to their approved form, touched their forehead in a manner of their species, showing thanks, their eyes expressing bafflement. The gun was then slid across the counter. Give them hell, human. To this, the human nodded and tucked the gun into their pocket. I do have to ask, the bureaucrat said, why did you bring the brick? To this, the human, standing tall, shrugged their shoulders, the sign of someone who had a mystery. In case you didn't give me the gun. The remainder of the day was a quiet one, filled with introspection and a close, careful analysis of the abandoned brick at the counter window. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.